Hello everyone, this is In-Game Arts with another boxing, another offline gaming experience. This is Resident Evil Village 8 from the PlayStation 4, but this was played on my PlayStation 4 Pro. Now, sadly, there was an update available. This update size was 500 megabytes and will take you to version 1.01, which just says bug fixes. Now, as like always, I did play the entire game without this update or ever connecting to the internet, and I didn't have experienced any game-breaking problems whatsoever. I did experience some minor, and I mean very minor, frame rate drops. This is with frame rate as its priority. I never played it with resolution mode, so I don't know what the experience would be like on that. And as I said, though, I did play it on PlayStation 4 Pro, so your experience may change if you play it on a base PlayStation 4. Other than that, I didn't experience any other bigger problems. The only other two ones I can notice was that Ethan's flashlight tends to have this weird bug where it will be facing more down to the ground. At the beginning of the game, I think it's designed that way, but later in the game, when you go across these like caves and like dungeons, the flashlight would actually face forward where you're looking. Well, I did experiment with this, and I did die, and over a repeated chance of dying, the flashlight did bug out, and it was pointing more towards the ground, like at the beginning of the game. And I just died, and it refixed itself, pointing towards forward. So there's a little bug issues with the flashlight. It can happen on you. It doesn't leave the game unplayable. It just does make it a little bit harder to see, because the game is pretty dark. I did have to fiddle with the brightness of the game, because even for my standards, it was pretty dark of a game. And the other noticeable bug was that the mercenary mode, there's some audio issues I experienced. It didn't cause problems. It's just when you went to the store in the game, in-game store, where you upgrade your weapons or buy equipment, there was no audio. This was only during mercenary mode. I never experienced this at all during the main campaign. Now, going into Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil 8, for me as an experience of the game, it can summarize as a lot of good and a lot of bad. Now, I actually beaten Resident Evil 8 a long time ago, and I just actually been sitting here trying to figure out how I wanted to do my commentary about the game. Now, you can pretty much skip the rest of this. This is if you're not interested in my opinion of Resident Evil 8. You got all the information you wanted at the beginning, so if you want, you can go ahead and go. But I am aware that Resident Evil series is a split community right now. You have the Resident Evil originals, and then you have the newer series of Resident Evil, which I call action survival Resident Evil, and then you have survival horror Resident Evil. Like Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, and now 8, which is more of a survival action, while you have the other ones, 1, 2, and 3 was somewhat of a split, but you had like Resident Evil 7 and Code Veronica, which was more onto the survival horror aspect of the game. Now, both are equally good. In no way, in shape, or form is one lesser or better than the other. It's just for a different community. Though action survival is more widely more loved because action is generally the most community get involved in. While despite our love for survival horror, and mine particularly, and I know a good community amount of people, survival horror is still a niche community. It's one of the bigger niches, but it's still a very niche community. And so when you get a big company like Capcom, they're going to focus what gets them the bigger bucks, what's going to get the most crowd involved, which is action. And then you just add a little bit of survival into the game, and makes people think they're playing a horror game, and they're not really playing a horror game. And Resident Evil 8 is none of that. It's none of horror. It's completely a Rudy Tooty shooter. And there was no consideration at all at making this, or even the thought to make this a horror game. As I played the entire game first time on hard difficulty, I don't really care to play on this Nyric's higher difficulty, Shadow of the Village. But going through the game, nothing was scary. Nothing was atmospheric. Everything was just very bland and uninspired in terms of being a survival horror game. Now, it was a good action game. It was good to try to pick up resources, sell them at the store and everything like that, and upgrade your weapons. And it's still one of my most favorite progression systems is upgrading and buying that kind of stuff in games. But in terms of providing a survival horror, the game is a big disappointment. If that was their goal, they failed miserably at being a survival horror game. There's only one moment in the entire game, which is called the Doll House, which I have seen many people say that it's the best part of the entire game. And sadly, even though I do agree the Dollhouse is the best part in the entire game, even that part of the game is poorly done and poorly executed, and frankly, not very fun. It was very mishandled, and what makes it worse is when you get done with the Dollhouse and you move on to the game, the rest of the game feels very bland and uninspired and even more boring. Out of all the Resident Evils, Resident Evil 8 is one of the few out of Resident Evil 6 that I have no interest in playing the game again. I've beaten it. I don't even care to 100% the game by upgrading every weapon or doing Mercenaries mode, as the enemy variety was just boring. There was very little enemy variety, and their design was very boring, as well as the story in the game is just bonkers and so many plot holes. I don't even know if Capcom takes Resident Evil serious anymore. Now, it's fine. If Resident Evil is meant to be seen as a joke, that none of it's supposed to be seen as serious, the characters are ridiculous, the world's ridiculous, the gameplay is supposed to be ridiculous, okay, fine. But they don't really broadcast it that way. They try to treat it as though it's a 100% serious game, and nothing about the game is serious. It's a really 2D shooter with no real heart involved in trying to make it both a survival horror or a survival action game. And despite me saying this, I know some people would say I'm making a lot of negatives about the game. The game is still fun and addicting to try to 100% complete the game and do all the upgrades, and it's still a challenge for those who want that kind of challenge. It's not a hard game by any means, but it's still worthy of your time, and I'm not trying to say it's a bad game. It's just, compared to like Resident Evil 7 and some of the other Resident Evils, Resident Evil 8 is a big dud. It's bland and generic and just not a lot of fun. It's still a fun game. I know it's kind of contradicting myself. It's still fun, but not rewarding for your time to go through it all over again. And it's just a combination of the lack of atmosphere, lack of direction, and just the over exaggeration of events goes on in the game, and just the characters like Ethan is very boring. The other characters in the game are boring. I'm sorry, I'm not with everyone on Lady Dimitrescu. I thought she was an uninteresting and uninspired character as well as the rest of the characters. I have no idea what people's obsession for that character is. And the rest of the game was just combined with that. I really don't see what other people see in this game. Now, again, I'm not trying to say the game is bad. It's still fun. I still recommend it, probably picking it up and put it on your shelf. And the only reason I did buy Resident Evil Village is because I had all the other Resident Evils on PlayStation 4, and it just felt wrong that I have 8 on there. Because I actually kind of expected this from 8. From everything I saw and learned about 8 looked like, well, a joke, and meant to be seen as a disrespect or a way to say that Resident Evil isn't Resident Evil anymore. And that's very clear with the whole vampires and werewolf stuff going on. But overall, it's still a decent time. I still recommend picking it up. But if you're a hardcore fan of Resident Evil, even the original ones like 4 and 5 and stuff like that, 8 is really on the nose and being good in any direction of an action survival or a survival horror. I'd say it's better as an action survival just because it at least has the elements there, but it does it very poorly. But survival horror, do not go into this survival horror at all. What they do with it is completely just poor. This is no other way to say it. It's just very poor. And I know probably many people disagree with that, but I can't change how I feel about the game. I did beat it. I completed it. I don't have no interest in coming back to it, and I don't see what everyone's raving and ranting about it. It kind of left me in a form of a video game depression because it made me feel like I don't understand the community. I don't understand it. Like I said, there's so many games that I don't understand at why people are praising, even though it clearly has very clearly bad designs and just lazy implications into the game. And just other stuff in gaming. And just, lately, my love for AAA and some of these older games have just been gone. I don't have the same passion anymore. I still love gaming. I just more focus on indie now because I see a lot more of that passion and time and creativity in indie, while AAA games are just bland and boring and generic, and you can clearly tell that they don't have the same passion and love put into it. 8 is a great example of that. It's got the shell of Resident Evil, but it doesn't have the heart of Resident Evil in it, and that clearly shows in the entire experience of the game. Not saying it's bad or you shouldn't pick it up. It's just compared to what came before, Resident Evil 8 is a huge disappointment for me, and it's probably my #1 disappointing game of 2021. And I don't really recommend it if you're going into wanting to play Resident Evil. I recommend if you just want to play a Rudy Tooty shooter action game, then go right ahead. But if you want memorable gaming experience and be one of the best survival horror games that ever came, Resident Evil 8 doesn't even come in the top 100. But still, it seems that Alien Isolation and Darkwood are still the king of survival horror. I will try to leave links down in the description if you Instacopy. If you highly disagree with me, I'm perfectly fine with that. I've had to come to accept that people just have a much different outlook in gaming than I do. And I am well aware that my views in gaming are generally not the popular ones. So thank you all for watching. Like I said, I'll leave links in the description if you're Instacopy, and I probably will cover the game again when I get like the PS5 and there's like a Game of the Year or Complete Edition down the road, because considering how well the game is selling, that's probably going to happen down the road. So, like always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next unboxing video. Bye-bye!